This video is a follow-up video to the Intro to Quadratic Projectile Word Problems. If you haven't watched part 1, you should go ahead and watch that first. In this video, the only difference is now the equation that's given to us is given to us in standard form. So let's jump right in with this first problem. The height, h of t, in feet, of a launched water balloon t seconds after launch is h of t equals negative 6t squared plus 48t. How high does the balloon go, and how long does it take to reach its highest point? When does it hit the ground? What is its height 5 seconds after launch? So the first step we need to do before we can answer any questions is turn that equation into vertex form. So let's do that. We start by taking the negative 6 out of the negative 6t squared. And then I always like to think of the sign first. Negative times what will give me the positive? A negative times negative. And then I can think 6 times what is 48. 6 times the 8t. And then I know I'm going to have a positive number that goes on the end there. Now I'm not going to put anything on the end because there is no c value here. You don't have to put a plus 0. All right, next up, make your generic rectangle. Let's put our t squared in the upper left hand. And then remember, we split the negative at into the diagonal boxes as negative 4t and negative 4t. Now we can fill in the outside with t times t, and then we would have a negative 4 times a negative 4 to get our negative 4t's. So negative 4 times negative 4 completes the square with a positive 16. That number goes into our missing space in the parentheses. Now remember, that positive 16 is actually being multiplied by a negative 6. So negative 6 times positive 16 is negative 96. So on the outside, we have to put the opposite of negative 96, which would be positive 96. Now we can go ahead and take that and simplify it to vertex form. Now, the most useful part of vertex form is the vertex. That's where it gets its name. So, what is our vertex? Remember, opposite, don't change it. That gives us a vertex of 496. Next up, we would want to go ahead and make a little diagram. So you want to make a diagram that has your axes, an upside down parabola. You can label your vertex. Sometimes it's helpful to label your vertex on the axes as well as the x-intercepts. Now let's go ahead and analyze each question. So the first question they ask us is, how high does the balloon go? So another way to think of that is we're going to find our maximum height. Next question is, how long does it take to reach its highest point? So we'll just add to that, reached at, since we're still talking about the maximum height. Next question is, when does it hit the ground? And the last question is, what is its height 5 seconds after launch? What we do for this is we're just going to evaluate for h of 5. All right, let's look through our answers. So, maximum height, as you can see on the drawing, is 96 feet. When does it happen? It happens at 4 seconds. If it takes 4 seconds to get to the maximum height, it would take 4 more seconds to get back down to the ground. So it hits the ground at 8 seconds. And then for h of 5, we would rewrite our vertex form and plug in 5 for t. Now you can do a lot of this evaluation in your head, but at some point you probably want to write something down. I wouldn't expect you to do the entire thing in your head. So let's see how far we can get. So 5 minus 4 is 1. 1 squared is 1. And then I multiply that by negative 6 to get negative 6 plus 96. And then when I add those together, I get 90. And don't forget, it's a word problem. So let's label it with 90 feet. Last problem. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. When you're done, go ahead and hit play and check your answer. As always, Watch out for the fraction. All right, let's take a look at converting this to vertex form. So the first thing you have to do is take out the -1/2, and that's going to be -1/2 times d squared. And then I like to go ahead and get the sign correct first. So I'm thinking a negative times what will give me a positive, negative times negative. And when I'm dealing with a fraction like a half, I'm not going to think 10 divided by a half. For me, it's much easier to think half of what number will give me 10. And then I know I need half of 20. And then I know I'll have plus something, our perfect square, and close it off. Next up, you make your generic rectangle, put your d squared in there, split your -20d into -10d, and now we can fill in the outside. D times d for d squared, d times -10s to get our -10d. -10 times -10 gives us 100, and that goes in the missing part of our parentheses. Now remember that 100 is actually being multiplied by the -1/2. So half of 100 is 50. So that would actually be -50, and we have to do the opposite of -50, which would be +50. Now let's go ahead and write this in vertex form. Draw a quick diagram. So I'm going to set up my axes, draw my upside down parabola. I want to go ahead and label my vertex by doing opposite, don't change it. And then sometimes it's helpful to go ahead and mark maybe your maximum height from the vertex, and also put the 10 on the distance axis. And then if you want, you know that 10 yards out, you're at your maximum. That means when you go another 10 yards, you reach the ground again at 20. Let's go ahead and use our diagram and our equation to answer our questions. So the first question is, how high does the ball go? Our maximum height is going to be 50 yards. That's the y value, or h of d value, of our vertex. And how far out will it be horizontally when it reaches its highest point? This will happen when you're 10 yards out. This would be our x value, or in this case, our d value of our vertex. Next question, how far out does the golf ball land? Notice that this is also asking basically what our x-intercept is, or in this case, our d-intercept. So you can see on the graph that the ball lands 20 yards out. So the last question is, what is its height when its horizontal distance is 8 yards? So this is basically just evaluating h of 8. So we put that into our vertex form, and then you can start working it out in your head. 8 minus 10 is 2, 2 squared is 4, and then I know half of 4 is 2, and that's a negative half. So that would give me -2 plus 50. And since this is a word problem, we want to give our answer with units, even if we're running out of space. So our final answer here is 48 yards. So that will conclude part 2 of our Intro to Quadratic Projectile Word Problems.